This Tuesday, the Supreme Court of the United States will hear arguments in the next major Second Amendment case, and it essentially threatens to shut down the firearms industry nationwide. So let's break down what is happening in this critical case. Now, really quick before we jump into this video, I want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is 1st Phorm. 1st Phorm is an amazing company if you're trying to work out more, get healthier. They have great supplements, protein powder, and all of that. But also they're pro-freedom, pro-America, and they support the Second Amendment. Not a lot of companies would support 2A channels like mine, but 1st Phorm believes in the Second Amendment and they want to support this community. So if you're interested, check them out using the link down below. And also, if you use that link and you order something $50 or more, you will get a free 4-pack of energy drinks. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be breaking down a very significant Second Amendment case, which the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on this Tuesday, March 4th. This case is the Smith & Wesson versus Mexico lawsuit. In this case, a group of the largest firearms manufacturers in the United States, which include Smith & Wesson, Barrett, Century Arms, Colt, Glock, Ruger, and many more, are being sued by Mexico. The nation of Mexico is suing these companies in an attempt to hold them liable for harms that were caused by cartels in the nation of Mexico. This whole case revolves around the PLCAA, also known as the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, and the question is whether or not the nation of Mexico and potential other nations and individuals can sue gun companies and hold them liable for third-party criminal conduct. This case is one of the biggest cases that we have going on right now, and this is a direct threat to the entire firearms industry and essentially every individual in the United States and our ability to actually acquire and potentially get firearms going forward. If Mexico wins this lawsuit, the floodgates will open up for other countries and other individuals and groups to sue gun industry members and manufacturers and sue them essentially into oblivion and force them to shut down. So we need to spread the word and also share this because there are critical oral arguments that are happening in front of the Supreme Court this week. Now, this case made its way to the Supreme Court because the First Circuit Court of Appeals reversed a dismissal of this lawsuit. The Mexican government sued leading members of the firearms industry, essentially seeking to hold them liable for harms which were inflicted by Mexican drug cartels. According to Mexico, America's firearms companies have engaged in a series of so-called business practices for decades, and they claim that these business practices include the selling and making of AR-15 rifles and other types of semi-automatic rifles and handguns and magazines that hold over 10 rounds. They claim that these firearms manufacturers and the industry at large has failed to put in various restrictions on themselves, and they have continued to supply firearms to the populace at large, which have then been smuggled into the nation of Mexico and then used by criminals and drug cartel in Mexico to perpetrate crimes. And essentially, Mexico wants to hold the firearms industry liable for those actions. Mexico sued these companies and claims that there has been around $238 billion in damages to the nation of Mexico, and they are seeking $10 billion in compensation from the gun industry. They're asking for injunctive relief in the form of America also imposing new gun control measures in the United States to essentially restrict the sale of all semi-automatic rifles and also magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. You heard that right. Through this lawsuit, the nation of Mexico is seeking to enforce gun control on the entire nation. Now, this case was originally filed and heard in a federal district court in Massachusetts, and on review, the district court dismissed this case under the PLCAA. However, Mexico then appealed that dismissal up to the First Circuit Court of Appeals. And on review, the First Circuit reversed that dismissal and sided with the nation of Mexico. The First Circuit held that the PLCAA does not bar this suit because Mexico stated a claim that the defendant's business practices have aided and abetted the firearms trafficking to the cartels, and that proximately caused the harm that is alleged by Mexico. That, of course, is very concerning, and in response, these gun companies have now filed for Supreme Court review, and they want that ruling of the First Circuit to be reversed. In the petition to the Supreme Court, the questions presented by the companies to the Supreme Court are: 1, whether the production and sale of firearms in the United States is the approximate cause of the alleged injuries to Mexico's government stemming from violence committed by drug cartels in Mexico. And 2, whether the production and sale of firearms in the United States amounts to aiding and abetting illegal firearms trafficking because firearms companies allegedly know that some of their products may unlawfully make their way into Mexico. Now, you may be asking yourself, what exactly is the PLCAA? Well, again, this is a federal law that's in place that is aimed to protect manufacturers and dealers in the gun industry and prevent them from being held liable when crimes are committed with their products. This law expressly was put in place to prevent these types of lawsuits. However, the First Circuit looked over this law and said that Mexico could still bring this lawsuit. In the petition to the Supreme Court, the gun companies argue that Mexico's complaint does not include any groundbreaking factual revelations, nor does it uncover any secret dealings between the cartels and the American firearms companies. Instead, Mexico's suit challenges how the American firearms industry has openly operated in broad daylight for years. It faults the defendants for producing common firearms like the AR-15, for allowing the products to hold more than 10 rounds, for failing to restrict the purchase of firearms by regular citizens, and for refusing to go beyond what the American law already requires for the safe production and sale of firearms. In Mexico's eyes, continuing these lawful practices amounts to aiding and abetting the cartels. So that's important because what Mexico is alleging is that these gun companies are not breaking any federal laws, they are operating lawfully, but that general operation of law and doing things lawfully allegedly has caused them harm, but criminals have got their hands potentially on some firearms, and that has caused potentially some harm to Mexico. And so through this lawsuit, they want to regulate the firearms industry in the United States. And oh, by the way, get them to pay billions of dollars back to the nation of Mexico. In this lawsuit, the gun companies state that the PLCAA precludes civil suits seeking to hold firearms companies liable for harm stemming from the downstream criminal misuse of their products. And it is nearly impossible to imagine a suit that is more clearly barred by the PLCAA than this one here. The district court agreed, dismissing this case in full, but the First Circuit reversed. It held that Mexico's lawsuit qualified for an exception to the PLCAA, which narrowly authorized suits alleging knowing violations of firearms laws that proximately caused a plaintiff's injuries. To fit within that exception, the First Circuit held that Mexico plausibly alleged that America's firearms companies have violated the federal law against aiding and abetting firearms trafficking, and that their regular business practices are the proximate cause of the many diffuse harms and costs that Mexico incurs from cartel violence. The First Circuit's decision cannot stand. It defies this court's precedent and creates an admitted split with a unanimous Third Circuit decision joined by then Judge Alito, as well as the decisions of multiple circuits and state high courts. This court's review is warranted. The First Circuit's decision creates a direct and admitted split on proximate cause and is brazenly defying this court's precedent on aiding and abetting. Both present important questions of federal law with serious implications well beyond the firearms industry, affecting every business whose products might be criminally misused downstream. Absent this court's intervention, Mexico's multi-billion-dollar suit will hang over the American firearms industry for years, inflicting costly and intrusive discovery at the hands of a foreign sovereign that is trying to bully the industry into adopting a host of gun control measures that have been repeatedly rejected by American voters. At the bottom, this case reduces to a clash of national values. Mexico makes no secret that it abhors this country's approach to firearms, and that it wants to use the American court system to impose domestic gun controls on the United States that the American people themselves would never accept through the ordinary political process. So this is a very important case. At stake in this lawsuit is whether or not the gun industry can essentially be sued into oblivion. Mexico and the anti-gunner groups that joined this lawsuit and support the nation of Mexico are trying to set a very dangerous precedent which would open the doors and potentially weaken the Second Amendment in the United States. They are trying to use this lawsuit and this opportunity to impose anti-gun values on the United States, essentially force the gun industry into, rifle bans, magazine bans, and other types of bans that ordinarily would never pass in Congress. Now, oral arguments will be heard and held in this case this Tuesday, March 4th. So we're going to be hearing how the Supreme Court essentially wants to, deal with this case, maybe how some of the justices feel about this issue. In my opinion, this is a very open and shut case under the PLCAA and never should have even got past the district court. The district court was correct in dismissing this lawsuit and throwing it out, but the First Circuit got this wrong and said that Mexico could bring this type of lawsuit. Also, we'll be keeping our ears on, maybe some other things that are maybe mentioned in this lawsuit and during the oral arguments, maybe about rifles and magazines and how they're protected by the Second Amendment. I suspect that some things like that will maybe leak into these oral arguments, and maybe that will give us some insight about, some other pending lawsuits that are going on right now with, rifle bans and magazine bans at a state level. So that's also going to be interesting to hear during the oral arguments, maybe how they address, these types of rifle restrictions and magazine restrictions as well. So share this news around because this is a critical case that is a threat to the entire gun industry. As we get more information, I'll let you guys know. If you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you see value in this information and in this type of 2A news. But as always, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget this station was built by Armed Scholars, and this station will be maintained by Armed Scholars.